Controlling your environment. As you set up your studio space for this class, there are a couple of things you're going to want to keep in mind as you select where you're shooting. Now, you really don't need anything special. A garage is great, your living room, a spare bedroom, but you will need to be aware of a few considerations. Ambient light. Be aware of ambient light. If you're shooting next to a really large bank of windows that gets direct sunlight, this is going to be a problem. Or maybe you have really bright overhead tungsten lights. You're going to have to do something to reduce the effect of these lights in your shot. So close the curtains, dim the overhead lights, and I've already actually discussed how this affects your photo in the shutter speed video. So once you've got your settings right, make sure you take that shot without the strobe to make sure you aren't seeing too much of the ambient light registering in your final shot. Wall color. I get asked all the time by people that are setting up their studios, what is the right color to paint my walls? And really the key is just that it needs to be neutral. You could go white, you could go black, you could go gray, but make sure if you go gray, it doesn't have blue or warm undertones. Because in whatever space you're shooting in, the light's gonna bounce around everywhere and it picks up the color from the environment. Here's the thing. Technically, if you want complete control over your space, painting your walls black is the best way to go, because when you're lighting the scene, the light's not going to bounce and fill in the shadow, so you have the control. The downside is it ends up looking like you are shooting in a creepy dungeon and your subjects probably won't like that. If you look at most rental spaces, everything is white. White ceilings, white walls, white floors, all of that. But the light will bounce around. So what do you do if your space is white? The solution is if you know you're in maybe a small space, so with white walls, and the light is bouncing everywhere, is that you need to either hang black fabric on the wall or use a black V-flat. A V-flat is simply two pieces of foam core, big piece of foam core taped together, and usually one side is white, one side is black. So one side will allow me to absorb the light when I want to have dark shadows, and the other side I could use to bounce. I use V-flats all the time in my studio, and this is probably the most common solution if you're shooting in a small white space, but you still want a silhouette or you want dark shadows. Check out the gear guide for more tips on buying or making your own V-flats. Other bounce. Don't forget that other elements in your scene may reflect light that you would never even have thought about. Like if you're shooting in your living room and you have a really nice teal or pink couch and it's just to the left of the frame, it's definitely going to create a color cast in your shadows. Or maybe you have a bright colored throw blanket on a chair next to the scene. It's probably going to reflect some light. So look for any brightly covered surfaces and move them or cover them up. Now, here's another example you may never have thought of. I actually have my assistant here, and the assistant is holding a reflector. And in these different shots, he's wearing different colored shirts. Check the shadow side of the face. What's happening? The main light is hitting my subject, but it's also bouncing off the assistant's shirt, and then the shadows are going to have that color cast. So just examine your scene. If there's bright colors or really any saturated colors, you're probably going to want to cover or remove it in order to take as much control over light and color of your scene as possible.